Why is it that we often lose motivation in the middle of something we truly care about? Why do some goals start off feeling exciting but gradually become boring or even overwhelming? James Clear, in his groundbreaking book, Atomic Habits, introduces a fascinating concept known as the Goldilocks Rule, and it might just explain why we give up, and more importantly, how we can keep going. To understand the Goldilocks Rule, let's briefly revisit the classic tale of Goldilocks and the three bears in the story. Goldilocks enters the bear's house and tries 3 bowls of porridge. One is too hot, one is too cold, but the third is just right. She finds the same experience with the chairs and the beds, too hard, too soft, and then just right. This just right principle is not just a fairy tale, it's a psychological truth about human motivation. James Clear uses this idea to explain how we stay engaged with difficult tasks. If something is too easy, we quickly get bored. If it's too hard, we get frustrated and quit. But when a task is just beyond our current ability, not too easy, not too hard, we enter a zone of peak engagement. We feel challenged, focused, and alive. This is what psychologists call the flow state, and the Goldilocks Rule is how we get there. The human brain is wired for challenge. But not just any challenge, it's wired for challenges that lie at the edge of our comfort zone. When you're faced with something that is slightly above your skill level, it grabs your attention. You have to concentrate. Feel the thrill of possible success, but also the risk of failure. It's the perfect cocktail of engagement and tension. That's what keeps you going. Studies have shown that our brain releases dopamine, not just when we achieve something, but when we're on the edge of achieving something. It's that sense of anticipation, of getting closer to a goal, that lights up the brain. That's why games, sports, even video games are so addictive, they constantly place you in that Goldilocks zone, where you're being challenged just enough to stay interested. James Clear connects this concept directly to habit formation. When we try to build better habits, the biggest danger isn't failure, it's boredom. If the habit is too easy, it feels like a chore. If it's too hard, it feels impossible. The magic lies in designing your habits so they remain just challenging, enough to feel meaningful. That's when you're most likely to return to them day after day. Think of a writer who has been trying to write every morning. If they try to write a full chapter on day 1, it's overwhelming. But if they only aim to write a sentence, it's too easy, they won't feel satisfied. But if they commit to writing, say 200 words a day, it's manageable, yet substantial. That's the Goldilocks zone. It feels like progress without pressure. The same is true for fitness. Someone's new to working out, jumping into an intense 1-hour routine is too much. It creates anxiety and soreness that might discourage them from continuing. On the other hand, doing 5 jumping jacks and walking for a minute might be too easy. There's no sense of effort or accomplishment. But a 15-minute workout, customized, just slightly above their current endurance, is just right. Hard, but doable. They break a sweat, feel proud, and return the next day. Across every field, athletics, academics, business, you'll find the Goldilocks rule at play. Top tennis players don't train against total beginners. They train against opponents who are just as good or slightly better, forcing them to stay focused. Students don't learn from lectures that are too simple or too complicated. Best when the information stretches them, not breaks them. Musicians, artists, engineers, all grow fastest when they're slightly uncomfortable. When the challenge forces them to rise, but doesn't paralyze them. This is how you grow your habits too, by starting small and slowly increasing the difficulty in tiny increments. You stay in the Goldilocks zone. You don't shock your system. You build momentum. Day after day, you stretch your ability by a small amount. And those small improvements compound into remarkable change over time. But here's the hard truth. Even in the Goldilocks zone, boredom eventually arrives. Doing the same thing, even if it's meaningful, can feel repetitive. James Clear writes that the greatest threat to success is not failure, but boredom. You start skipping the habit. You lose interest. And before you know it, you've abandoned something you once loved. That's why the Goldilocks rule isn't just about difficulty. It's also about mindset. You need to train yourself to fall in love with the process, not just the result.
Oh, duh.
People who succeed over the long term are the ones who keep showing up even when it's not fun. They embrace the routine. They master the boredom. They find joy in repetition. Because real growth doesn't come from one dramatic breakthrough. It comes from quiet consistency. Doing your work even when no one is watching. Staying in the zone. Day after day, even when it feels ordinary. That's what separates the elite from the average. The best in the world aren't always the most talented. They're just the most consistent at staying in the Goldilocks zone. So how do you apply this to your own life? First, take a clear, honest look at where you are, whether you're trying to learn a language, build a business, lose weight, or develop a skill. Figure out your current baseline. Not where you wish you were, but where you truly are. That's your starting point. Next, design your habits just slightly above your current level. Push yourself, but only a little. If you can run for 10 minutes, try 12. If you can read 15 minutes, aim for 20. Don't double your efforts overnight. Increase them slowly. This is how you stay in that magic zone where progress feels possible and effort feels meaningful. Then, track your experience. Notice when you're bored. Notice when you're anxious. Those are signs that you've slipped outside the Goldilocks zone. If it's too easy, raise the difficulty. If it's too hard, reduce it. Constantly adjust. Yes. Stay self-aware. The goal is not to be perfect, but to stay close to that sweet spot. And finally, remind yourself that this is a long-term game. Motivation will rise and fall. Some days will be fun. Others will feel like a grind. But as long as you're operating near your edge, not at your limit, not at your floor, but near your edge, you are growing. You are improving. And that's what matters. The Goldilocks rule is more than just a productivity hack. It's a philosophy for life. It teaches us that success doesn't require superhuman effort. It requires smart effort. Effort that is focused, aligned with your ability, and repeated consistently. When you learn to live in that sweet spot, not too hard, not too easy, you tap into the deepest form of motivation. So the next time you feel unmotivated, don't ask, "What's wrong with me?" Instead ask, "Is this too hard or too easy?" And adjust. Find your Goldilocks zone. Stay there. Work there. Grow there. Because that's where your future is waiting when you begin to operate within the Goldilocks zone. Something profound starts to happen. You stop chasing motivation like it's a mystery, and instead start managing it like a system. You begin to recognize that motivation isn't something you wait for. It's something you engineer by choosing challenges that are balanced with your current ability. You wake up each day not asking yourself whether you feel like doing the work, but instead preparing the environment, the mindset, and the level of challenge that keeps you in motion. This is where many people go wrong. They assume high performers are just more inspired or more naturally driven. But more often, those people have simply mastered the art of staying in the right zone. They understand that motivation is not magic. It's math. Take, for example, the story of a young coder named David. He wanted to learn programming from scratch, inspired by dreams of building his own app. But every time he opened a massive coding book or watched an advanced tutorial, he felt lost. He felt stupid. He quit. It wasn't because he didn't care. It was because the task was simply too far outside his current capability. It wasn't in the Goldilocks zone when David finally switched to a beginner-level course, something that taught one small coding concept each day. He started to feel different. He wasn't overwhelmed anymore. He was learning. And after a few weeks, he began pushing himself. One extra exercise, one new concept, one small challenge. Each step was manageable. Each day was progress. And after several months, what once seemed impossible became routine. That's the power of living in the Goldilocks zone. It builds your belief system. It reshapes your identity. Stop seeing yourself as someone trying and failing, and start seeing yourself as someone improving. That shift from discouragement to progress is the engine behind all lasting change. Even world-class performers, from Olympic athletes to CEOs, rely on this principle. It's not about working harder than everyone else. It's about adjusting the difficulty just right again and again over the long term. In fact, the very act of adjusting is part of the discipline. The best learners, performers, and habit builders are not rigid. They're responsive. They pay attention. When something feels too easy, they raise the bar. When something becomes overwhelming, they lower the intensity. It's not weakness, it's wisdom. Adaptation is a sign of mastery. Think of it like climbing a mountain. You don't sprint up the side of Everest. You climb in stages. You acclimatize. You take rests. You adjust your load. But every step forward, no matter how slow, takes you closer to the summit. If you climb with consistency and balance, eventually you'll stand where few have stood. Not because you were faster, but because you refused to burn out or give up. One of the most powerful things about the Goldilocks Rule is that it honors the human experience. It doesn't expect perfection. It expects persistence. It recognizes that our attention is limited, our emotions fluctuate, and our energy comes in waves. That's why this rule works, because it adjusts to your reality, while pulling you toward growth. Now, let's explore how this concept shows up in the lives of everyday people. Imagine a mother of two who wants to return to writing after years away. She doesn't have hours of free time, but she carves out 20 minutes each night. At first, she writes only a few sentences, but those few sentences become paragraphs, and those paragraphs become pages. Not trying to win awards or hit bestsellers overnight. She's trying to reconnect with a part of herself, slowly, deliberately. Each night she writes just enough to feel challenged, but not overwhelmed. That's the Goldilocks Zone at work. Quiet, humble, and transformational. Or consider a teenager struggling with social anxiety. His goal is to build confidence, but the idea of public speaking terrifies him, so he starts smaller. He begins by greeting one new person a day, and he builds 2 short conversations. Then group discussions. One step at a time, each challenge just a little more difficult than the last. Over time, his identity changes not because of a massive event, but because of a series of manageable, progressive acts. That's how confidence is built, not with courage alone, but with calibrated, consistent exposure. Even in relationships, the Goldilocks Rule applies. Deep connections don't happen overnight. They grow through repeated acts of small vulnerability. One meaningful question. One honest answer. One layer peeled back. If you reveal too much too soon, it may feel unsafe. If you stay surfacely forever, the relationship feels shallow. But when you move at a pace that feels just emotionally challenging enough, you grow closer. Whether with friends, partners, or family, trust grows in the Goldilocks Zone. This principle can also transform your workplace. Imagine leading a team. If you delegate only the tasks they're already good at, they'll lose engagement. But if you throw them into the deep end without support, they'll drown. Effective leadership means assigning work that stretches people slightly, that challenges them to learn while supporting them as they do. Growth happens when people believe success is possible, not guaranteed. That's the sweet spot for motivation. And it's where great teams thrive. In all these areas, personal growth, learning, leadership, relationships, the Goldilocks Rule shows us that the key isn't intensity, but calibration. Growth is not an explosion, it's an evolution. But none of this happens without self-awareness. You have to learn to listen to yourself. You have to recognize the signs of boredom and burnout. Boredom says this is too easy. Burnout says this is too hard. And in between those signals lies the wisdom you need. When you feel yourself drifting either into complacency or into fatigue, pause and reassess. Ask yourself, am I still being challenged in the right way? And then adjust. Doesn't make you weak, makes you strategic. Let's also acknowledge that the Goldilocks Zone is not static. As you grow, it moves. What was difficult a month ago may be easy today. And what feels impossible today might be your warm-up, a year from now. Your challenge is to keep matching your effort to your evolving capacity. That's how you avoid stagnation. And that's how you keep your habits alive. It's also important to remember that this rule works best when combined with purpose. Challenges for the sake of challenge can burn you out. But when your effort is tied to meaning, when your habits are linked to your identity and your values, the Goldilocks zone becomes a pathway to fulfillment. It's not just productivity. So ask yourself, what matters to you? Why are you building these habits in the first place? Who do you want to become? Because once you tie your small daily challenges to a greater purpose, even hard things become worthwhile. Suddenly, you're not just waking up early, you're becoming a disciplined person. If you're not just learning Spanish, you're becoming someone who values cultural connection. You're not just exercising, you're becoming a person who honors their health and vitality. In the end, that's the secret James Clear is pointing us toward. Habits are not just actions. They're affirmations of who we are. And when those habits are built inside the Goldilocks zone consistently, deliberately, and with care, they have the power to reshape your life. You don't have to be extreme to be successful. You just have to be consistent. You just have to stay in the zone. That's how you write a book. That's how you run a marathon. It's how you learn an instrument, grow a business, raise a child, rebuild a relationship, heal your body, strengthen your mind. Not all at once. Not with heroic effort, but with steady, challenging, balanced action, day after day. It won't always be glamorous. It won't always be exciting, but it will always be worth it. Because the Goldilocks rule doesn't just help you achieve your goals. It helps you become the kind of person who doesn't need to be pushed, the kind of person who keeps going when others stop, the kind of person who doesn't need motivation to do what matters. You become someone who lives in that beautiful, narrow, powerful space between comfort and chaos, between ease and exhaustion, someone who finds the sweet spot and stays there and grows there. That's where your habits thrive. That's where you become unshakable. And that's where your future is built, one deliberate, well-balanced step at a time. Sometimes the hardest part of building a habit isn't the doing, it's the patience. We often expect immediate results. We want to see the change now? Feel the difference today. But real transformation doesn't shout, it whispers, quietly, slowly, invisibly. And the only way to keep going during that invisible phase is to trust the process and stay inside your Goldilocks zone. That means resisting the urge to jump ahead. It means not comparing your journey to someone else's. Because while others may seem to sprint, they might be skipping the foundation. And what is built without a foundation cannot last. But when you train yourself to love small progress, to fall in love with improvement instead of perfection, something amazing happens. You become unstoppable, not because you're moving fast, but because you never stop moving. And that's exactly what the Goldilocks rule teaches us, that staying in motion is more important than sprinting ahead. When your habits are tuned just right, not too easy to bore you, not too hard to break you, they begin to reinforce themselves. Each time you show up, you get a little better. Each time you finish, you build momentum. Each repetition becomes a vote for the person you are becoming. You don't have to be a genius to live like this. You don't have to be naturally talented or especially gifted. You just have to be someone who shows up, who listens to their limits, and who pushes just enough to grow, but not enough to quit. You don't burn yourself out trying to be perfect. You find satisfaction in the pursuit itself. Let's return for a moment to something often overlooked: boredom. Most people think boredom is a sign they should quit. But boredom is not the enemy. It's a signal. It's a nudge that says, this has become too comfortable. It's time to adjust. And when you respond to that nudge with curiosity instead of quitting, you find new ways to stretch yourself. You add a new level of challenge. You try a new approach. You make the task interesting again. And that reawakens your motivation. Mastery, after all, is not avoiding boredom. It's showing up anyway. It's finding ways to stay engaged even when things become routine. The best way to do that is by gently, continuously increasing the challenge. Never too much. Never too little. Just enough to feel alive. This is also why gamifying your habits can be so effective. Turning your habits into a game with levels, rewards, or milestones keeps your brain stimulated. It taps into your natural desire for progress. It transforms the experience from something you have to do into something you want to master. Even James Clear talks about the importance of measuring progress. Because when we track our improvements, even if they're tiny, we stay aware of our growth, and awareness is powerful. It reminds us that we're not stuck. We're evolving. It fuels the belief that our effort is working. And belief is the foundation of every long-term habit. Think of a gardener planting seeds. On the surface, nothing seems to happen for weeks. But below the ground, transformation is taking place. Roots are forming. Strength is being built where no one can see. And then one day, the first shoot appears. But that sprout didn't come from one day of work. It came from many quiet days of showing up. Your habits are like that. They grow underground, in silence, in repetition. And your job is not to force them to bloom overnight. Your job is to keep watering them with effort, with patience, with smart adjustments guided by the Goldilocks Rule. As you grow, remember this. Every expert was once a beginner who didn't quit. Every athlete started out uncoordinated. Every speaker once stumbled over their words. Every writer once stared at a blank page. But they stayed in the zone. They kept pushing just enough. They kept showing up long enough to let progress compound, and eventually the line between beginner and master disappears. Not because they suddenly became gifted, but because they grew into it. That's the miracle of consistency. That's the power of small, well-measured challenges. So now the question turns to you. What is your zone? What challenge is right for you today? Not 5 years from now, not 5 months from now, but today. What habit could you build if you made the task just difficult enough to be exciting, but not so difficult it overwhelms you? Could be writing a single paragraph, reading 5 pages, taking a 10-minute walk, saving a few dollars, practicing. One sentence in a new language, just enough to engage you, just enough to remind you. I am the kind of person who gets better every day. You don't have to live inside extremes. You don't have to punish yourself to grow. You don't have to chase perfection to be proud. You just have to find that space, that narrow space, where challenge and ability align, and stay there. That's the Goldilocks Zone. That's where you build habits that last. It's where change becomes natural. You'll still have hard days. You'll still face doubt. But the Goldilocks Rule gives you a compass. When you feel lost, it points you back to balance. When you feel stuck, it reminds you to adjust. When you feel tired, it tells you to rest, not to quit. And when you feel ready again, it encourages you to step forward with just enough resistance to feel alive. This rule is not about doing more. It's about doing better. It's about finding your rhythm. It's about recognizing that greatness doesn't live in extremes. It lives in the middle. In the daily, in the deliberate, in the disciplined. So the next time you set a goal, ask yourself, how can I make this just hard enough? How can I design this habit so it challenges me without crushing me? How can I stretch just a little, grow just a bit, improve 1% today? Because if you can do that day after day, year after year, you will not just reach your goals. You will become the kind of person who doesn't need goals to grow, because growth has become your identity. That is the promise of the Goldilocks Rule. That is the heart of atomic habits. And that is how ordinary people do extraordinary things. So, what can we take away from all this? First, don't wait for motivation to strike. Create it by starting small and staying consistent. Show up even when it's boring, even when it's hard, especially then. Second, design your habits to be in your personal Goldilocks zone. Not too easy, not too hard. Just enough to keep you growing. That's where mastery lives. Third, progress is more important than perfection. 1% better. Each day may seem small, but over time, it becomes life-changing. Fourth, when things get easy, don't ghost level up. And when they feel overwhelming, scale back. Just the challenge, not the identity. Keep the habit alive. Fifth, remember that boredom is not a failure, it's feedback. Use it to add variety, tweak the habit, re-engage yourself without breaking the chain. Sixth, track your wins, celebrate progress, and trust the process. You're planting seeds today for a harvest you'll reap tomorrow. Finally, Understand that success doesn't come from massive shifts overnight. It comes from showing up in the zone over and over again until the person you want to be becomes the person you are. Because at the end of the day, the Goldilocks Rule isn't just a strategy, it's a mindset. A way of living that says, I don't need to be perfect. I just need to keep going. So keep going. Your future self is already grateful.